You're listening to the REI Marketing Nerds Podcast, the leading resource for real estate investors who want to dominate their market online. Dan Barrett is the founder of AdWords Nerds, a high-tech digital agency focusing exclusively on helping real estate investors like you get more leads and deals online, outsmart your competition, and live a freer, more awesome life. And now, your host, Dan Barrett.
All right. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the REI Marketing Nerds Podcast. As always, this is Daniel Barrett here from AdWordsNerds.com, where the best real estate investors in the world go to find more leads and deals online for their real estate investing business. AdWordsNerds.com. All right. Hey, this week I've got Joe McCall on the show. Now, if you have been around the block for a while, Joe McCall should need no introduction. In fact, you could just go back to my own past episodes with Joe McCall. He's been on the show before. He is always such a thoughtful and insightful guy, a fantastic real estate investor. But I think the thing that really sets Joe apart is his talent for automation, delegation, streamlining complicated processes. I met Joe so many years ago now, and he was the first investor I met who was successfully investing, doing a bunch of deals, really active business, but essentially doing it from the road, like just doing it part-time, going on vacations, kind of living the lifestyle that I'd always imagined, being in college, reading the 4-Hour Work Week and books like that. Joe McCall is that guy. And if you have ever been interested in how you can take something like real estate or perhaps land investing, which seems complicated, it's got all these moving pieces, and truly automate it, Joe is the guy. And in fact, he tells a story in this episode of how he ran his land investing business basically with just his 2 teenage sons, which is really fascinating to me. So we are going to get into it. You are going to get a ton out of this episode. I know I did. So let's go listen to Joe McCall from JoeMcCall.com. Welcome to the show, man. Thank you so much for being here.
Hey, Dan, good to see you, man. Really, it is.
Yeah, man. You have been on a couple times now. Every time I get a ton out of it. You were one of the first real estate investors I worked with, which is pretty cool. And a million bazillion years ago. Yeah, it was a long time ago. So very happy to have you on. You are always doing a bunch of really cool things in terms of investing, in terms of teaching. And so I don't know. I just love having you on. I have a personal question. So we're going to start there. So, we were talking before we jumped on, and I think a lot of people will know you as one of the people that really popularized lease options as a business model in REI. I think you were really one of the first people to really push that and kind of make that what it is today. And I noticed that you kind of shifted a little bit and you started focusing on land. You got like a course up that you kind of teach land stuff. But specifically, the thing that jumped out at me on your website was you mentioned that you do land with your 2 teenage sons.
Yeah.
So it's just give me the background on this. So my kids are 7 and 9. I'm in my head, every now and then I'm it would be so cool to all work together. And then I'm but maybe they'll kill me. Maybe that would be terrible. And I have all these questions.
Or maybe you'll want to kill them.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your kids. Tell us about how you guys started working together.
Well, I had the same thing. I wanted to teach my boys. I have 2 boys and 2 girls, and my boys are doing their own thing now. We don't do land together anymore, although they still like it, and I have a feeling they'll come back to it, and I'll explain kind of why. We started when they were maybe 14, 15 years old, and they wanted to just make some extra money. They were too young to go out and get jobs, and so I was at this time when I was doing wholesaling and I was doing lease options. And I was trying to come up with a business that I could do with my boys as teenagers. And so, as you know, with with houses, it's a little harder to train a young teenager whose voice is cracking, how to negotiate with a seller, how to understand ARV, after repair value, and how to estimate repairs, and try to talk to a seller who's been living in the house for 20 years and negotiate with them or have an intelligent conversation with them. So I thought, what if there was a way we could do I heard about vacant land.
Yeah.
So I just started interviewing people on my podcast who were doing vacant land. And I had a student who was doing a lot of houses, and he was struggling because he was doing deals, but he didn't like it. And I had interviewed a guy. His name is Todd something. Anyway, his last name was Todd. One of my favorite interviews I've ever done. And he talked about how he was doing vacant land on the side. He was one of the higher level executives at a big, huge car rental company. He saw the writing on the wall, knew a CEO came in, and he kind of cleared house. So this guy started wholesaling vacant land, selling vacant land on owner financing. And within a year, he was able to make more money from notes, from the income from the owner finance notes of his vacant land than he was in his executive corporate level job. And I loved his story. Todd, what was his name? Scott Todd. That was his name, Scott Todd. And he's got a great website, landofmoto.com, if anybody's interested. And so I thought that's really cool. And so I told one of my students who was doing a lot of houses, hey, you should check out Land. And I sent him that podcast. He went and bought some courses and got some coaching. And then within a year, he's making about $11,000 a month on owner finance notes selling land. So he'll buy land at 25, 35 cents on the dollar, sells it with owner financing. And I thought, this is really cool. This is fascinating. And I went to somebody's event, workshop. And it was a good workshop, but I started talking to the students that were there that were doing deals. And I started interviewing them, kind of like, what are you doing? How are you doing it? And one guy said to me, yeah, this is what we do. Like, I'm just doing it part-time. And he started explaining his system to me where he sends out direct mail. The direct mail sends him to voicemail. The voicemail, couple times a week, he listens to the voicemails, and then he sends them an offer without even talking to them or calling them back. And then he has either himself or his assistant follows up every 2 weeks. And then if they don't hear back 30 days later, they send the offer again, and they keep on just sending the same offer over and over again. Yeah. And they follow up. And I thought, oh, that's really cool. And so I'm a big fan of FreedomSoft. And so I started thinking about how could I automate this whole business? And I started doing it myself, where I started sending direct mail to people who own vacant land. And we could talk about that later. But then the postcard would say, text or call our 24-hour recorded voicemail. So the letter, when they got it, they know when they call that number, they're not going to talk to anybody. And I didn't give them a website. I want them to call that number because I know within FreedomSoft, I can get phone numbers inside of FreedomSoft. I can set up campaigns that are centered around that phone number. And so anytime somebody calls me, it captures that as a lead. Now I can follow up with them. If they hang up or whatever, I can call them back. I can text them. I can follow up with them. So we set this up where they sent out postcards. We got responses. They left a voicemail. And then I started learning how to evaluate these deals. And it's very like a house where you're talking to a seller. There's a lot of emotion involved. They've lived there for 20 years, or they've owned it for 10 years as a rental, and they've put in a ton of money into it. And they're tired, frustrated landlords or whatever. With land, the landowner is much more detached. It's more transactional in nature, not emotional as much, right? So it's more of just a numbers game. And so I would start making offers that, like, I had a spreadsheet, 25, 35 cents on the dollar. I'd figure out, okay, what was it worth? What could I sell it for? And I would just make an offer at 35% of that. And we would send the offers. And with FreedomSoft, I'd send the offer inside of FreedomSoft, and then FreedomSoft does automated follow-up. So 2 weeks later, it would send a text, and then it would send an email if I had their email. And then it would send them another letter, and it would remind us to follow up with them. And so when I figured this out, I thought, I could have my kids do this. And so I just trained my kids how to get into FreedomSoft, listen to the voicemails, go to Zillow or Redfin, look up similar properties in that area, get an average price per square foot or price per acre, figure out, okay, property might be worth this. If you have two different numbers, like we would look at active comps and sold comps, pick the lower of the two number and just go with the lower number, make an offer at 35%, put the numbers in here. So I created little Loom videos. I wasn't Loom at the time, it was something else. And I showed them how to do it. And I gave them access to a Google Sheet, and they would maybe 2 or 3 times a week in the evening, usually after they were done with school and sports or whatever, they would go in there and they would send their offers. And then I set it up where I knew which deals came from my one son and which deals came from my other son. And I would pay them 15% of the profits. But I wanted to pay them, I paid them hourly at first because I knew it was going to take several months for a deal to come in, and I didn't want them to be discouraged. So I would pay them hourly, but then I would deduct what I'd already paid them from the profits in the deal. And so together, over I'd say 2.5, 3 years, we did about $153,000 in profits.
Wow.
On deals that they did with me. $153,000 in profits. That was the difference between what we sold them for and what we bought them for. We did this in about 4 different states: North Carolina, Oregon, California, and there's one other, maybe Florida. I don't remember. I think Florida was one of them. Yeah. So that's it. And so I thought, this is great. And I created a course shortly after that. About a year after that, I created a program and I started selling the course and teaching people how to do it as well. Because my approach has been, there's a little different. There's a lot of guys teaching land right now.
Yeah.
I wanted to make it so simple that, a teenager could do it. That was kind of my goal with this, where you didn't have to talk to sellers if you don't want to. Now, it helps. If you can talk to sellers, it's good, because, it's always better if you can, if they can build a little bit of know, like, and trust. Look at this. Nice. What are you drinking there, Dan?
Oh, you got a Pellegrino there?
Yeah, I'm drinking one too.
The Drink of Kings, my friend. The Drink of Kings.
You get it at Sam's Club?
No, there's a Chipotle down the street from my house. It's like every day for lunch. It's like Chipotle and Pellegrino. That's like my go-to thing. So there you go. I should buy it at Sam's Club. I'm being stupid.
It's probably a little cheaper at Sam's Club. But yeah, that's it. So we just, I wanted something I could do with my boys.
Yeah.
And here's a cool thing too with land, because I've been teaching real estate for a long time, since 2010.
Yeah.
I've had way more student success testimonials from land than I ever did with houses.
Really? And do you think that's just because, like you said, you mentioned this right in the beginning. I think it's very smart, which is everything that has to do with residential also has to do with a very high level of emotion.
Yeah. Because
even if the person doesn't have an emotional connection to the house per se, when they're selling to an investor, there's usually a reason. The reason is usually not, there's either stress or there's a time limit or something, right? There's some
kind of distress.
Yeah. And which is always we'd always say, motivated sellers is like the euphemism, but motivation is the reason that they're motivated to sell is there's some problem they are trying to solve, right? Whether it's dire or whatever is a different thing.
Want to find motivated seller leads online, but don't know where to start? Download our free Motivated Seller Keyword Report today. AdWords nerds have spent over $5 million this year researching the most profitable keywords for finding motivated seller leads. And you can grab these exact keywords when you download our report at www.adwordsnerds.com/keywords.
And so is it just because the transaction type is simple enough, like you said, you could automate enough of it where, the best investors have deep expertise, they've got experience. You don't need to start with that, but a lot of times those are the people who do the best. Is it just, it's more of a thing that anybody can do? Is that kind of what gives people a better chance at it?
Well, there's a lot less competition. So there's not as many people contacting these sellers trying to buy their property. You don't have to move as fast. It's not as an emotional decision. So it's just a numbers game. I know that we average about 1 out of every 20 offers gets accepted when we talk to the seller first. When we're just mailing offers, 1 out of every 30 that get accepted.
Okay.
Other investors, they'll do what's called blind offers, where they'll download a list of 10,000 and they'll send 10,000 offers, just bam.
Yeah.
And they do that kind of based on an average price per acre in that city or in that county or in that area. But I prefer to get as many calls as possible, talk to them first, and then send them an offer. But there's different ways to do it. But I found that it's just not as competitive. Now, in some markets, particularly parts of Florida and parts of North Carolina, maybe, or Arizona, Colorado, it is more competitive.
Yeah.
But it fluctuates. It goes up and down. And when you compare it to houses, for example, with houses, if you're sending postcards, which I like to send, you're lucky if you get 0.5% response rate. Okay. We're getting 2 to 3% response rates right now, depending on the postcard that we send. I could show you my stats right now. We're getting 3.5% in one county, in a very competitive county in Florida. 3.5% response rates right now. Now, a lot of them are hangups and a lot of them are angry calls, stop calling me.
Right.
But you get the same no matter what you send. And when you're in a competitive county, and you're lucky if you get 0.5%. So our average cost in marketing per deal in land is, from our numbers right now, and I'm not promising this for anybody else, it's about $1,000 to $1,500 in marketing per deal. Now that's after a lot of follow-up. We make a lot of offers, but on average, $1,000 to $1,500 in marketing per deal. I have so many friends in houses that are spending $5,000 to $10,000 in marketing on average per deal that they complete. Now they're making 20, 30 grand per deal. So they're still making a lot of money, right? But it's a lower barrier of entry with vacant land. And there's a ton of it. I did some studies where I looked at how many houses are available per active investor in the United States. And I basically just looked at the entire U.S., how many LLCs had bought properties in the previous 90 days versus how many houses there were. And I had about one house for every, 3,000 real estate investors that were doing houses.
Really?
Right? Well, one house for every 3,000. No, sorry, other way around. 3,000 houses for every one investor. Was that the right number?
Okay. That makes sense. I was like, well, I certainly know the competition is high.
Yeah, not that. Okay, that's right. So it's like 3,000 houses for every one house investor. Okay. But then I did the same thing for vacant land. There was like 21,000 vacant lots available for every active land investor. And that's 7 times as much available land compared to the active land investor. So let's say I'm half off. But it's still 2 to 3 times more land available, properties available for land investors than there are houses for active house investors.
Yeah. I think, because Google Ads is the thing, obviously, I'd still know the best. And we don't do a ton of land advertising, but we do some. I think that's become more of a thing in the last year or two. And the cost per click in Google is a market function, right? So the more people that bid on a keyword, the more it costs to get a click from that keyword on average. Call that the cost per click. So the cost per click in like traditional REI is easily 10 to 20 times what it is for land, right? It's just like the sheer number of competitors and the amount they're willing to spend is so much higher. So I think it's like, it always strikes me as, like you said, a potentially really viable option that doesn't have not as many people know about it. It's newer or, it's just not as established. So you mentioned like, and again, so I know the people that listen to this podcast know this. I know you're not saying this. We'll just, again, you're talking about your own experience, like promising this to anybody. I get that. But like when you say like, okay, you guys are spending about $1,500 to acquire a deal on average, right? So then what is the sale of that property like? Like who do you turn around and sell it to? Like what's that process like?
I'm looking at my numbers right now, by the way, and we are averaging about $20 to $25 cost per lead with our direct mail right now.
Yeah. Awesome.
Okay. So our buyers are going to be, depends on the size of the property. If we're buying a little 1/4 acre lot in Fort Myers, Florida area, that buyer is going to be usually an investor who's just looking to put their money in land in hopes of future appreciation. If we're buying 5 acres in North Carolina, that's going to be a recreational buyer. Somebody who just wants to buy some land to go hunting, camping, put a RV out there, or just a place that they can have where there's no restrictions, there's no HOAs. That's going to be more of a recreational type of buyer. Very rarely do we sell land to home builders. Some guys do, and there's a place for that. But mainly we're selling, what we do is I almost don't care who the buyers are. I just care where the buyers are. And so you can go in and you can look in any state and see which states have the most land sold in the last 90 days. And you can find that on Zillow. Just look at all these states and say, all right, show me the ones that have the most land that has sold in the last 90 days. And then you can drill down into the county using different tools. And you say, all right, in the state of Tennessee, which counties have sold the most vacant land in the last 90 days? And I like to go where there's the highest demand.
Yeah.
Maybe not number 1, but number 2, number 3, number 4. I want to go into those counties where there's already a lot of activity. I'm not trying to find a new market. I'm following the demand. I'm following the money. And then I go and see, all right, well, who is buying the land out here, right? And then it's like sometimes they're investors that have a ton of properties. Sometimes they're retail buyers are just looking for land where they can go camping on.
And are you just typically selling it like flat out? You mentioned like notes earlier. So like typically, how do you handle that?
For us, we sell about 85, 90% of our deals we sell on for cash.
Okay.
We're just wholesaling them.
Yeah.
I looked a few months ago in the prior 12 months, our average profits were about $10,800 on a vacant land deal. So that can vary. After direct mail, our net profit was maybe $8,500 or $9,000. after all of our expenses, closing costs, realtor commissions, direct mail costs, etc. So did I answer the question? I forgot what it was.
Yeah. Well, I was saying, like, do you sell it up front or do you do notes?
Oh, yeah. Here's the thing. I would sell more owner financing, but my business partner, Matt, real good guy, been friends for years. He's also an entrepreneur, but he's selling these deals because he wants to make more of the cash up front now. He doesn't have another source of income, right? So I'm kind of stuck where if I wanted to do more owner financing, which I do, I'd have to find somebody else right now because Matt doesn't, and understandably, doesn't want to do that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, let's talk about mail. You mentioned direct mail a couple times in there, and we were talking before we hit record, and you were mentioning that direct mail is basically the only marketing that you're doing. So let's back up. I would love because you've been doing this a long time now. You've been really top of your marketing as marketing for investors has changed over time, right? Like you've been on top. You were on top of digital stuff early. You've done mail. You've kind of been around the block in terms of the most common marketing approaches. Before we talk about you specifically, back up and give me your take on the current marketing landscape for investors, right? Like, because it's like when I talk to people, the things I always hear are like, I hear about competition, I hear about problems with text messaging marketing and like cold calling and things like that. So like from your perspective now, where are we as like an ecosystem in terms of marketing and how things are changing? And like, how do you see the current landscape?
Yeah, that's a good question. Because here's the thing. I remember when I got started in 2006, that was like the hottest time of the market that we've seen in a long time. Now, I mean, having said that, 2012 through 2020 has been a hot, amazing time as well. But like even back then in 2006, competition was fierce back then. I remember hearing people complaining all the time. Mm-hmm. Oh, this doesn't work anymore. It's too competitive. It's too hard to do deals. One time I had a student and two students, and they didn't know each other. And they were in the Colorado area, I think Denver. This is a long time ago. One of them called me and said, hey, this isn't working. I've got a bunch of buyers, but no sellers. And then another student called and said, hey, I've got a bunch of sellers, but no buyers. This doesn't work. I was like, really? So I gave them their phone numbers and I said, you guys need to call and talk to each other. And that was within one day. I had this two students complaining about that.
Yeah.
Well, it's a matter of perspective. Really, it is. This business works, period. If you see, this is why I like podcasts and what we're doing here, right? Like, I'm not very skeptical. I believe it's easier for me to believe things, Mm-hmm. But I see somebody else doing deals. I'm like, if that guy can do it, then why can't I? If that idiot can make, even if he's like just lying a little bit, or even if he's exaggerating and doubling his numbers, like if he can do it, then why can't I do it? If they can do it, why can't my kids do it? So I'm always thinking about that, like bigger ask. And when I hear people complaining, I was like, listen, and I'm not that old, but I just turned 50. And I've been around the block. I've seen the market shift and make changes. And one thing that always stays the same is change. That's the one constant. Mm-hmm. But the other thing is like people will always find something to complain about. It's either too hard to find sellers. It's too hard to find buyers. The market's going up. The market's going down. It's going flat. It's going sideways. There's always going to be a reason or an excuse. And I say this all the time. You can make money or you can make excuses, but you can't make both.
Yeah.
So like, it's hard. Then get over it. There's a funny video, and I don't cuss, but there's a guy named Frank Kern. Mm-hmm. He's got a video. If you look it up on YouTube, do a search for the 2 commandments of business, Frank Kern. He said the 2 commandments are, and I'll use the PG version, stop farting around and stop being a sissy. And he talks about this, and this is so good. I'm like, you know what? People are just farting around. They're not taking it seriously. If somebody were to put a gun to your head and say, send out some marketing and make an offer in the next 1 hour, I'm going to shoot your head off, you would find a way to make an offer, right? Like you would go online and you would Google how to make an offer. And you would find, and you would go to realtor.com, you would find a listed property and you would call the realtor and you would send the realtor an offer. Like you wouldn't worry about, you had 30 minutes to make an offer. You wouldn't worry about your business logo or your card or your website or Google ads or direct mail, or you would just like go right to the realtor. You'd go right to FSBOs. You would go right to rentals and call landlords and you would just make an offer. You would pick the Zillow estimate and do 50% of that. Like you would make an offer. So stop farting around with all this stuff that just doesn't matter. And the second thing is stop being a sissy, because you'll go out and you'll spend tens of thousands of dollars on coaching and education and masterminds and boot camps and stuff like that. But you won't spend $1,000 on a direct mail campaign or a PPC campaign. So you're just afraid. Like you want to get in the fight. But don't hit me. You want to get into boxing but like, oh, please don't hit me. But I don't want to get hurt. I'm not going to fail, am I? And you're afraid of failure. So the people that succeed in this business kind of have this fearlessness of like, you know what? I'm going to figure, and they're committed to the long haul. So they're committed. I'm going to do this for at least 6 months. All right. It's okay if I don't even do a deal. I'm going to give it 6 months, and I'm going to consistently every day, every week, put myself out there. I'm going to call sellers. I'm going to call realtors. I'm going to call landlords. I'm going to call buyers. I'm going to make offers. And you're going to talk to 5 people a day, and you're going to get 100 no's before you get 1 yes. But you're not going to be fazed by that. You're going to talk to 100 people. You're going to make 50 offers a week. And that's the people I know who have success in this business have that dogged determination. Like, I'm going to do this, and I'm not going to accept failure. It's not an option.
Hey guys, hope you enjoyed part 1 of this episode. It's just too good to limit to one show. Join us next week to hear the rest.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.